What's up, everybody? My name's Big Cam and welcome back to another Comically Boston breakdown episode. And today we are breaking down Marvel Animation's newest project, Eyes of Wakanda, in this 4-part limited season. I was originally hearing series, but this Rotten Tomatoes says Season 1 of Eyes of Wakanda, and its current Rotten Tomato score is 91% critic score with 22 reviews, certified fresh, and with over 100 reviews of audience score, it's sitting at 72%. I thought the audience score would have been a little bit higher. It definitely is higher than a 72 for me for audience score, but 91% critic score, so critics seem to be really liking this. It's funny that the Wakandan universe, 96% Rotten Tomato score for Black Panther, 90% for Eyes of Wakanda, 84% for Wakanda Forever. So all things Wakanda related are certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. But this series is 4 parts, like I said, and episode 1 is titled Into the Lion's Den. Episode 2, Legends and Lies. Episode 3, Lost and Found. And episode 4, The Lost Panther. And these 4 episodes kind of connect by the end, and you see how they connect in the 4th episode. But I thought it was decent how it was just kind of its own thing and, like, you know, could stand alone as, like, episode 1, 2, and 3, and just various different points in history as we follow the various different war dogs through that we'll learn about in this series. In episode 1, we're following Noni, and this is in Crete, 1260 BC, into the lion's den as she has to fight the lion, and we'll find out who he is and what that's all about in a second. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the show so far. It is from executive producer and director of the Black Panther, Ryan Coogler, and so far, Marvel Animation this year has really crushed it, and ever since Marvel Animation has become a thing, it's really crushed it between What If, X-Men 97, that's Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man I really liked as well. I can't wait to see the second seasons of those. Marvel Zombies will be coming later this year. But as far as Marvel Animation, I've really liked what they're doing, and with Marvel Television side of things, with Brad Winderbaum, I think they're doing a really decent job. But let's jump right on into this, shall we, and see what Eyes of Wakanda is doing for us with episode 1 titled Into the Lion's Den. And we open in 1260 BC Crete, and we're following the Wakandan spy, Noni, who is in Crete while they are being raided by the lion's people. And a man tries to fight back against these raiders when all of the troops kneel at once, and we see that the lion has arrived. And the man calls the lion a false god, so the lion says he will handle it himself and uses a purple Wakandan kind of powered, like we've seen before in other movies, but this is back 1260 BC, so they had this technology a long time ago, and this lion fellow uses like a powered up gauntlet glove and sends the guy flying back. And the lion seems to not need his crew members, and the guy that said, like, you want me to handle it, was like this big old dude, and the lion was just like, nope, I got it, don't worry about it. You know, so the lion doesn't need anyone else to handle his dirty business. And we see that the lion's raiders are branding these people if they don't follow the lion as their new leader. And they try to take Noni to brand her, but she says no one is her master, and she already has a home. And we cut 6 weeks earlier back to Wakanda, to her home, to find out more about Nani. And we find out that Nani is getting her orders from Akia, the leader of the Dora Milaje, and Noni was not a Dora Milaje, a kind of failed Dora Milaje. She wasn't one to work well with a team, and she's better off on her own, and that's kind of what lands her into being a war dog type of person. And Akia is recruiting her to go after Nakati, once a captain of the Royal Guard and a great warrior, only second to the king himself, she says, and he has stolen dozens of Wakandan artifacts when he left, and Noni has been tasked to retrieve them and stop the lion from making himself a king and building a kingdom that will rival Wakandans with this other Wakandan technology. And they are sending her because everyone else that they sent was trained by him, so he won't see her coming. So we see Nani go and accept her mission, and she starts beating up guards, and she's infiltrating one of the Lion's ships and sneaking in and grabbing one of the crew's outfits, so she's like in a disguise now. And we see one of the Lion's people is kind of like in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Eivor, you know, Viking looking girl, where she's white and she's got an attitude and tattoos all over the place. And they've been using this version of like an animated character a lot recently, whether it's between this girl in this show or in Predator Killer of Killers. There's a lady Viking in that looks a lot like this lady from Assassin's Creed Valhalla. If you know, you know. But the Viking girl starts smacking a woman around. It's violent. You're like, damn, okay, they're showing some crazy violence on this show. And so she's smacking around this woman who doesn't want to join the Lion, and Nani jumps in to stop them from, you know, hurting this woman that is like crying and just kind of like, I don't want to be here. And they're like, join the Lion, do what he says. And all he asks is you smile as he like forces you into his cult or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, crazy. But as Noni starts to fight them, the Lion hears the commotion and grabs a little magnifying glass looking thing and watches Noni fight, and more troops incoming, and he hears Noni call him no god and an imposter. So that he starts to grab his lion mask and his other artifacts like a staff and shit, and he starts to, you know, prep himself a little bit, where we see him just like as him with his white hair and long face and, you know, deep voice. I do love the voice of the Lion. Wakanda has many secrets. But as the Lion is getting ready, Noni is fighting the Viking girl and blinds her for a moment, and she throws the axe thinking it's heading towards Noni, and she ends up killing one of the big guys, one of her team members, one of the Lion's crew, you know, and the big guy all of a sudden gets an axe to the head. So I was like, damn! So the Viking girl kills the big guy, and then another guy, you know, who kind of also looks like an Assassin's Creed with like a white hood, he throws 2 throwing knives, and Noni puts the Viking girl in front of the throwing knives, killing her. So now he's all like, pissed off. He's like, nowhere left to run. He goes to throw 2 more knives at Noni. She dives into the water, escaping for a moment. And then she's sitting there talking to herself. She's like, be a ghost, Noni. Don't be seen, Noni. And then, like, you know, so she pretty much had the chance to go stealth mission in this entire thing and chose the loud and proud route. If you know, you know. And then Noni gets back on the ship and she's fighting, and she kills the final guy by throwing one of her throwing knives through this guy's chest. And we hear the Lion say, impressive. Are you coming up or not? Right? So he's been watching this the whole time, letting her kill all of his men, and then, you know, just sitting there waiting for her. And Noni comes up to see him, and he's like, you are different, you should join me, right? And he tries to like pitch her on joining his rebellion Lion troops, and she calls him by his real name, and he gets all angry, and he's like, I am not Nakati, or whatever his former name was, I am the Lion. You know, like, and he says that he belongs in the free world and that Wakanda sent him here. And he says that Wakanda is a kingdom of many secrets. You know, I loved his voice. It was so raspy and deep, but like perfect. And I also feel like the show could have been called Secrets of Wakanda instead of Eyes of Wakanda, but I actually like Eyes of Wakanda. And the Lion tells Noni that agents like them are called war dogs, and people Wakandans sent out to the real world to keep their secrets hidden. And he tries to win her over to his side, and then they fight, and he scratches her on her eye, and she sets off his mask that explodes, falling into the water, and he sets off a Wakandan-like bomb. And the Lion says to her, we will both be forgotten, but at least I lived free. As he's like sitting there like a suicide bomber, just willing to go die in the bomb, almost like a predator, you know, like, oh, I'm defeated? Well, blow up the place and destroy the evidence rather than leave a dead alien body, you know? So they cover up their tracks even in defeat. And so this is why we've never heard of the Lion, because he blew himself up at the end of this. But Noni dove out the window trying to not be exploded, and she survived. But as she jumps into the water, she loses the pickaxe that Killmonger was liking and looking at in Black Panther, and we see it fall to the bottom of the ocean in 1260 BC. So that axe will come back all the way years later, what, 2017 for Black Panther, but also throughout this series that axe will come back again. So, you know, remember that axe. But so Noni, you know, is swimming after it, but it's sinking too fast, so she loses the axe, but as she's swimming back up to the surface, she's able to find and retrieve the lion's mask. So that will also return in a future episode. But so she was unable to retrieve the other Wakandan artifacts, but she was able to defeat the lion and get his mask, so she was able to get a artifact, but not all of the artifacts. And Noni thinks she failed, but Akea offers her a spot on the Dora Milaje, and Noni turns it down, becoming a war dog instead of a Dora Milaje and choosing the path of the war dog. And it's like this war dogs that, you know, she is are like these lone infiltrating soldiers that are out there just trying to find Wakandan artifacts. And I find this show fascinating, and if they do another season of this, I would like maybe more than 4 episodes, but if they do another season and they go through various different times and different wars throughout history and different, you know, time frames throughout history. Like we go from 1260 BC to 1200 BC, so we time jump 60 years, and then there's a connection between those 2 episodes. But then we jump like 2,000 years between 2 and 3, and then we jump another 400, 500 years between 3 and 4. So, you know, like there's time jumps, but then it's still telling this, you know, cohesive story throughout thousands of years of Wakandan history, and, you know, filling us in, you know, in the gaps a little bit. And I actually really like it, and it made me think, like, what are these other war dogs that could have already existed that we already know of? And maybe Nakia was a war dog, maybe Najobu, friggin' Killmonger's dad, who was in America, although he was going of being a war dog the wrong way. But, you know, maybe he was a war dog. Why was he sent by Wakanda over there and being a lone soldier type of thing? But that's credits on episode 1 as we head into episode 2, titled Legends and Lies. And we follow Bakai, in his alias Memnon, in Troy, 1200 BC. And he's with Achilles, which is very interesting. But we see Odysseus, right? Like the Odyssey, Matt Damon's character Odysseus, that is going to be in the upcoming Christopher Nolan film, The Odyssey. Odysseus is sending his troops to fight the Trojans, and they're like sending in a battering ram to try and break down the front door so that they can get their troops into Troy. And they say they are outmatched, but they will win because they have Achilles, and they show Achilles beaten ass. And then we see Memnon, our war dog this episode, is helping Achilles defeat the Trojans. But Memnon says, not a victory for Greece, but a victory for Wakanda. So we learn that he's not just with the Greeks at this moment, he is with the Wakandans for some reason. In Troy, in this battle of, you know, the Trojans and the Greeks, somehow has a Wakandan artifact in the middle of it. And it's funny that, like, you know, as he's like scouting and looking at Troy, he's looking through like the same type of purple magnifying glass technology that the lion used in the last episode. So I was like, little details like that, I'm like, ooh, that little connection there. But then we go to the intro for this episode, and we cut back to Memnon and Achilles kicking ass together. And I actually really love to see this. I was like, oh yeah, the teamwork between the two of them. They work great together. But the Greeks are unable to breach the door, and they have to retreat. And Achilles is about to get shot because he's like looking at them, you know, saying retreat. He goes, they're retreating? We're just made it through, these pussies. But he doesn't know that they can't break through the door, so that, you know, the rest of the troops are just sitting ducks. So they call for a retreat, and they'll find a new way in another day. And, you know, as they're about to retreat, Achilles doesn't want to, and an arrowman, you know, an archer almost shoots Achilles, and Memnon puts his hand in the way and gets shot through the hand with an arrow, saving Achilles. And Memnon looks at Achilles and says, brother, this day is lost. And Achilles is all mad, picks up a sword and goes, and like throws it back. We then see Memnon use some advanced Wakandan healing technology to heal his hand from that arrow wound. So this clearly, you know, the higher advanced technology than the Trojans have available to them. But then we see Achilles pouting by the fire, and he's kind of like stabbing the coals of the fire, and Memnon comes to talk to him, and we find out that Memnon has been with Achilles for 9 years, and Memnon says he has Achilles' back. Otherwise, who else would be there to put the coins over his eyes for the ferryman? And what a steaming hot bowl of foreshadowing right there. When one of the other members of Achilles' crew comes and thinks Memnon is a Trojan spy. Not quite, but a Wakandan spy. And Odysseus has an idea for one last trick, the gift of the Trojan horse. So this is where the Trojan horse comes into the history of this war, you know what I mean? In this episode in the show, showing a Wakandan side to the Trojan horse. I was like, interesting. We then see Memnon sends a Morse code message to Wakanda, and his mission is to come back with the Wakandan artifact by any means necessary, or not come back at all. And Achilles talks to Memnon about drinking in the grass when they get home, and celebrating and being at peace once they get back and not fighting anymore. And he gives Memnon a necklace for luck. And he kind of like holds on to it. And he's like, no, I can't accept this. And he goes, you have been fighting by my side. You were like a brother to me. No, take it. I don't know if you guys picked it up at all, but I was kind of picking up maybe a little bit more of a vibe from Memnon and Achilles. You know, not quite just boys, not quite just soldiers fighting side by side each other. Feels like there's a real passion and love for each other there that goes deeper than just fighting with one another. So the boys go to fight, and they're hiding in the Trojan horse, and they disguise it as a gift for the Trojans. Oh, we give you a big horse to celebrate. And they're like, oh, I thought the Greeks would have sent us an olive branch. But it's now late at night. They're all drunk and celebrating, thinking they have won, and it works like a charm. The Greeks sneak in the Trojan horse, jump out, and they start, infiltrating and taking out everybody. They open up the front door, let in the rest of the troops, and they start taking over Troy, catching all the Trojans off guard. And one of the guards sees them coming in and rings the bell, and the fighting breaks out. And instead of going sneaky, now it's loud and proud time. So now the fighting starts breaking out and everything starts to go to hell. They're starting to get overwhelmed, and Achilles is like, Memnon, where are you? Because at the beginning of this episode we saw them working together, 2 on a bunch, but when they're back to back fighting together, they were doing great. But Memnon ran to go get the Wakandan artifact, so he has left Achilles sitting here by himself, and Achilles had to fight off all these guys by himself, and he's pissed. He's like, Memnon, what the fuck? And he's like, sees Memnon, look back, see him fighting alone. He's just like, whatever. I gotta go get my Wakandan artifact. See you later. We then see Memnon go and recover the necklace, the Wakandan artifact that he has been after for 9 years, which is damn near a decade of being with Achilles and trying to get this Wakandan artifact. Like, that's crazy. And as he's grabbing the artifact from this woman, he lets them go, doesn't kill them while he takes it. And Achilles, shows up and goes, what the hell? You left me to get some necklace? What the fuck? And he's like all pissed off. He's like, who are you? And, he tries to take the artifact from Memnon, and they, have a big fight over the artifact, and Memnon whips out a big powered metal arm, like Wakandan powered, and Achilles is like, what the hell? And tries to take it off of him. And then Memnon and Achilles are fighting, and Achilles gets on the back of Memnon. He's like trying to choke him out. He's like holding the Wakandan artifact in his hand, and Memnon grabs a sword and cuts his Achilles heel. And, this once great warrior that was so, superhuman fighting, one on a bunch and surviving, all of a sudden gets his Achilles heels cut, and he's like, stop. The battle is lost. Give me back that artifact. And he goes to stab him one last time, and Memnon takes his hand and stabs Achilles with his own swing. And I was like, oh no! And then Achilles friggin' with his Achilles heel cut, Memnon is able to easily best him, and he ends up killing him, leaving him laying in the water. And he was like, was it all a lie? And he goes, not everything was a lie. Like there was real feelings and bond between these two men. And oh god, what a heartfelt like ending. I was like, oh man, and what great writing. All of a sudden, you know, he has to put the coins on his eyes for the ferryman, and he's like the last person to see Achilles laying in the water, a dead body with his little coins over the eyes. And then we have to cut to Wakanda 6 months later. So it's been half a year, and Memnon, you know, his hair is growing out. He's got more of like a Wakandan outfit on, and he's back home. But he's like, I don't feel like this is home at all. And he like looks sad. And his real name is Bakai, not Memnon. And he sees Nani, who is 60 years older and now the leader of the war dogs instead of the first war dog. And Memnon says to her he doesn't want to be back because he has never felt so alone, and asked to be sent back out into the field again. And she says to him, sure, if that's what you want, but you have to know what you are actually out there looking for, you know, like. And he's like, whatever they want me to look for, I'll get any artifact. And she's like, no, when you're out in the world, it can be confusing. You have to know what you're looking for inside before you head back out into the field. And that's kind of where this episode ends. And I was like, the legend in lies, right? So the legend and old folk tale of Achilles isn't quite the story that we might remember, you know? So that's kind of where that title of that episode leads into. And I wouldn't be mad to see more of Memnon and Nani and head back to 1200 BC, you know, era of Wakandan eras. But with the episode 3 titled Lost and Found, it is set in 1400 AD. So we go from 1200 BC to 1400 AD. So what is that? Is that 2200 years or 2600 years later time jump? Either way, 2,000 plus year time jump between the last two episodes, and we are now set in 1400 AD China, in the snowy mountainside on this mountain top somewhere, snowy in China, and we follow our war dog Basha, and we see Basha sleeping next to a woman at the beginning of this episode. And if you guys have a keen eye, you maybe recognize the outfit she's wearing, and you're like, ooh, why is Basha next to the blank? We'll get into who this character is in a second. We then see Basha is sneaking through this Chinese facility wherever this lady has taken him, and he is sneaking through and steals the Wakandan artifact, which is like this dragon head with this Wakandan vibranium tongue. So really, I think they're just after the tongue, but he took the whole statue because he couldn't get the tongue out. And, you know, he's poorly making his getaway that leads to him getting, you know, found, and they're chasing after him, and he has to sled down this mountainside to get to his ship, and he punches this friggin' snowbank, and then all of a sudden a ship appears, and he's flying home in 1400 AD. So we're talking, what, over 700 years ago maybe? So Wakandans have had this flying technology for a long time, and they've just hidden it from the world. So they've been super advanced and able to probably change the world for many hundreds of thousands of years, and just kept it to themselves, just kept it in-house. I don't blame them. I don't blame them. And Basha is flying back to Wakanda, and he's radioing in, and they say, we thought we lost you to the dragon curse. It's been weeks since we've heard from you. And he goes, nah, no such thing as that dragon curse. I don't know what you talk about. I'm on my way back to Wakanda. And they cut to the intro, and the intro is very interesting for this one because it's kind of got Basha and this Iron Fist character with this kind of Iron Fist mask fighting each other, but then also kind of like grabbing her face like, ah. You know, so these two kind of fell in love with each other rather than fighting each other all the time. We then see Basha gets interrogated by Ebo when he gets back, and a councilman who is very upset. And they're like, all right, where have you been? What have you been up to? Why didn't you call back? Why has it been weeks since we've heard from you? And then all of a sudden we see his ship in the hangar bay, and the person checking out his ship and doing an inspection all of a sudden gets attacked, and somebody has hitched a ride to Wakanda on Basha's ship. We then see the Iron Fist grab Ebo, and she says that she's here for Basha. Where is Basha? So he instantly goes, oh, so that's why you're here, and that's how you got in, is Basha. Okay. And she's definitely pissed at Basha that he left stealing her relic and also didn't say goodbye. But so Ebo's like, oh good, Basha's the way you got in here? And he kind of tricks her and puts her into a trap and locks her into the lunchroom with a bunch of other Wakandan, you know, fighters in there, and she turns around and goes, ah, fuck, and it bleeps fucks, or it could have been shit or whatever, but it's just, ah, bleep, and I was like, oh, Iron Fist swears? Nice. And she seems to be able to handle herself well, won on many Wakandans, and then she beats them all up and disappears, and the councilman puts together, it has to be Basha and Ebo responsible for this intruder, because the only ship to come into Wakanda has been Basha's. So then Basha and Ebo are like, don't worry, I have a plan. We can cover this up and fix this. We then see the Iron Fist run to a dead end, and she looks out the window and sees Wakanda is beautiful and how beautiful it really is. And Basha grabs the Iron Fist and, you know, is like, who are you? How'd you find me? And he finds out that the Iron Fist is Jornani, who saved Basha in the snow and nursed him back to health. And we see a flashback of the two of them falling for each other and him sneaking out. And as he sneaks out, she grabs her Iron Fist mask and follows him, right? So, like, she's been curious about him ever since she found him in the snow, and like what his deal is and why is he trying to find this ancient culture up in the mountains. But also she ends up falling for him in the process, you know. In this couple weeks he's been there, they end up kind of falling in love with each other. But Basha still was on a mission, so he found the artifact and went back to Wakanda, and she followed him back. But she thinks Wakanda is amazing and beautiful. And then they fight, and they like jump on the train system, and they're making a run for the artifact room to find, you know, the artifact that she's after. And, you know, I really like the two of them, and her Iron Fist outfit, and like she kind of is like got this love story going on. I'm really digging this Iron Fist over any of the other Iron Fists. And as they're both, you know, chasing each other, she knocks him off the train, and she makes it to the artifact room before him. And he says that the statue's metal was stolen from us 1,000 years ago. And she says, and in that 1,000 years, it has meant more to my people than it ever will to yours. And that's a decent point, you know? Like, yes, the artifacts were Wakandans, and they were stolen, and they were put into a museum or whatever, you know, kind of like Killmonger's. She's like, oh, that's a whatever BC artifact. And he's like, nah, that's Wakandan, taken from my ancestors, so I'm gonna take it back. And he steals it back type shit. But like, if you steal and then you keep stealing, then that's just a cycle of stealing that's just gonna keep going forever. So, I don't know. Who's right here? Is it Wakandans, whose artifact it was stolen from thousands of years ago? Or in that 1,000 years, that now that artifact means so much to these other people, and they're not using the artifacts to take over the world and make a kingdom stronger than Wakanda? I think they could have let this person in these people keep that Wakandan artifact. You know, I don't think all of these artifacts need to be taken back to Wakanda, especially if they're not using it for bad. You know, they were just like praying to it, worshiping it. But then they start fighting in the artifact room, and she punches the lion's mask from episode 1 and kind of sends everything flying. And then Basha uses this like stapler powered Wakandan gun and like staples her to the ceiling. And he's like, how are you doing this? And Jornani says, she is the guardian of the mountains. She defeated the immortal dragon, Shao Lao, and drew power from his molten heart. I am the Iron Fist, and then delivers like a huge punch down. And I was like, holy shit, this Iron Fist bitch is, you know, just in a couple of lines, already more interesting than so many characters in the MCU. I'm like, I want to see this girl's backstory. Ebo then comes in, and Basha tells him to stand down because him and Jornani are kind of together. And Basha says, we have to come to some kind of understanding. And she simply just takes the vibranium tongue out of the dragon statue and gives it back and says, if you told me from the start, we could have avoided this. And Ebo's like, are you kidding me? You could have avoided all of this? And she like just gives back the vibranium, no problem. I'm going to take my statue back home. And then Basha and Ebo have to convince the councilman it was all just a training exercise that Ebo and him came up with. And the guy's like, oh, Ebo, what are you doing in records then? You gotta get a promotion. So Ebo gets a promotion and then goes to sneak them out back to their airship undetected. And Basha's like, okay, whatever you say, Agent Ebo. And Ebo's like, oh, I kind of like this. And then that's where credits go on episode 3. So far, that is my favorite episode. Mostly because, if you guys know me, I'm a sucker for a love story. But I kind of want to see the Iron Fist's origin story and her in 1400 AD. So what was it? What is that? 2000 minus 625 years ago. The Iron Fist beat up a dragon, and then his molten heart, so his heart is like lava, right? Which makes sense, like where does the fire breath come from? A molten lava heart. So this dragon that was immortal gets beaten by an Iron Fist, and then she drains its molten lava heart into power, into her fist. I don't know, but I gotta see that origin story. But on to the final episode, the last Panther, which we do discover the last Panther and who she is in this episode. But what we're actually following this episode is Prince Tafari and his guard, boss, teacher type thing, Kuda. And they are location Ethiopian city of Adwa in 1896 AD. So we jump 496 years from the last episode to episode 4. And Prince Tafari and Kuda are infiltrating a battle, right? Like, so they're trying to get this artifact in the middle of a war that they're not involved in. So they're trying to sneak through the war without being noticed. And Kuda is telling Tafari, we should give up and turn back because it's in the middle of a war zone and it's too dangerous. And Tafari disobeys a direct order, and he's like, just like a war dog to disobey an order and go out on his own and accomplish a mission as a lone warrior. And he's like, I'm gonna kill you, but he recovers the same Wakandan artifact that Killmonger looks at, the pickaxe in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. But so this pickaxe came back from drowning somehow in Crete 1200 BC. This axe is still around. You know what I mean? Like, and he's like, yeah, I found the artifact. What's up? But so he recovers the pickaxe, and then we go into the intro for this 4th episode. And then as we cut out of the intro, we see the Watcher is watching them driving back to the Wakandan city. And Tafar is maybe an important character to watch, because why is the Watcher, Uatu, watching this moment? Very interesting. And we learn that Tafari is a prince, right? So he is the 3rd son of the king and queen of Wakanda, and he is looking to write his place into history and talking about how he doesn't think this axe will get him into it, and saying that this right after we just saw the Watcher watching him in this moment. And he even mentions that the axe's handle isn't the original handle, which is definitely, you know, a nod to like the original handle from the 1st episode, so that changed. But the pickaxe top is what we know is vibranium, because the same thing from Wakanda Forever, they grab the axe, they break off the top of it, and he goes, this is vibranium. He like sniffs it and puts it in his pants, and then sells it later in that movie to Ross. But right as Tafari is talking about his place in history and this axe, he then sees an invisible cloaked Black Panther appear in front of them and breaks their ship and makes them crash. And she beats up Kuda and Tafari, and they have like a 2-on-1 against her and only are able to best her when they're working together. And it starts to work, but she says, I am not your enemy in Wakandan. And she is clearly Wakandan, but not from this time. And they're like, what does that even mean? And she says, I can show you. And she grabs their heads and their eyes glow like purple or something. And then we go into her eye and it goes black for a second. And she tells them to just open your eyes. And then we see through their eyes, she's showing them the future of Wakanda. And she shows them 500 years in the future, the Horde, an alien-like insect species, made their home of Wakanda into a graveyard. And we see the last Panther, a golden armored wearing Black Panther woman, is like fallen, blasting back the Horde for like the final time, and they were left helpless, but they were surrounded by the past Wakandan technology, which is super advanced. So she used it to go through time and says every moment is linked in a chain of events, each leading to the next. And we see this lady, or this Panther, time travel past the last 4 episodes of this series, and she goes past Nani in episode 1 losing the axe, and then she goes to Memnon, and then she goes to Basha, and then Prince Tefari, and she says she went back through history to see what led to the demise of Wakanda and to break the chain that has been linked together, causing this chain of events. And it took her many years to figure it out, but the axe needs to be put back where it was found by Tefari, so that Killmonger, years from now, will one day find it, and the rightful king of Wakanda will open up Wakanda to the rest of the world, and with the rest of the world's help, meaning the Avengers probably, they will defeat the Horde and save her timeline. So this has become a multiversal, time-traveling type of story, and also could include, you know, further outside world besides Wakanda. You know, like, I'm wondering if one day in the future we will see the Horde, or maybe it was like, we're never going to use the alien enemy of this insect enemy of the Horde. We like our enemies to be more like a Thanos, like a guy we can look at and be like, that's the villain. I don't know if we can do that with just aliens versus the Avengers. I would be here to see the Avengers just covered in alien bug guts. I mean, but what's the story there? You know what I mean? Like, it's just brutal chaos. Like, that's more like a video game. Like, yeah, we're taking out the Horde, you know, and splattering everywhere, and they're fine with it because it's not humans or, you know, like, characters. It's just bugs. But as the last Panther is telling Tefari and Kuda this, she gets sucked back to her time. And she was saying to them that she, you know, every time she uses this, the heart-shaped herb is protecting her from getting killed. But if she does this one more time, it'll be the last time she's able to do it. You know, so she just figured out that this axe is the cause on her, like, final go-around. You know what I mean? Like, she's like, oh, I figured it out. All right, we gotta get this axe back. And then she goes back in time. So now it is up to Kuda and Tefari to put back this axe, and they say that they have a new mission now. It is to return the axe. So they go back to the war zone. They have to go back in, and the last Panther wants to go back to, you know, finish the mission because she says it wasn't completed, but the Horde has found them. So she has to fight off and defend the portal from the Horde on her timeline so that it doesn't end up infecting their timeline. Now, the future and the past is all up to Tefari and Kuda putting back this axe. And if they don't, it could mean, you know, a future timeline gets destroyed entirely, or an entire race of Wakandans in a different timeline gets wiped out. So Kuda's like, and Tefari is like, we gotta get this thing back. And we see Kuda pushes Tefari out of the way of a falling building, and the building falls on Kuda, and Tefari's like trying to get him up, and he says, go, complete the mission. And he leaves him, and Kuda's like, now you listen to my orders. And so Tefari runs back and puts the axe into a grandfather clock right where he found it, so that axe will be able to be found by Killmonger years from now. And I was like, oh wow, what a like nice tie-in to all things Black Panther and this show. Like, wow, what a nice little story. And then as he's doing this, we see the last Panther and the last of the Dora Milaje fighting off the Horde till the last possible moment, and she says, Wakanda forever! And Tefari got it back where he found it, and he ends up pulling Kuda out of the rubble, and Tefari and Kuda wonder if they actually did save the future, and how would they ever actually know. And Tefari wants to see this future that they fought for, or at least how long will it take until it comes to the past, you know. And we see an animated recreated shot of Killmonger looking at the axe from Black Panther, literally almost a side-by-shot shot, you know, recreation of that moment. And like, if Killmonger doesn't find that axe and go through his little triumph and take over Wakanda, so T'Challa beats him and takes over as the rightful king of Wakanda, all of that needs to happen, or the history of Wakanda gets destroyed by the Horde. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy how little things in time, like putting an axe in a grandfather clock, and if it's moved from there, changes the course of history. You know what I mean? So when you're going through your life, think about the little choices you make and how that little choice can affect what your life looks like for the rest of time. Very, very interesting. I liked this show a lot. If I had to give it like a score, maybe like a 4 out of 5 stars, maybe like a high 8, maybe a high 7, low 8 type of score out of 10. But yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I don't know if it's 91% Rotten Tomatoes, but it's certainly not 70% audience score. So yeah, I'm kind of in the middle there. I'm kind of about an 80% out of 100% Rotten Tomato score. And I actually really enjoyed the show quite a bit. And I thought it was going to be a limited series. It's kind of a bummer that they dumped it all at once. Like, I think week by week, this could have been a fun show to talk about with people for a month. Instead, we're going to have just one episode breaking down four Eyes of Wakanda episodes. And maybe we'll never get another season. And if we do get another season, I know I would watch. Comment below your thoughts, though. Would you want to see more war dogs in various different times throughout history, going and collecting these artifacts that were once stolen by the lion way back in 1200 BC, you know? So I'm fascinated by the history of this, the Wakandan of this, the way that it tied into the history of Wakanda that we saw throughout the show, but also to the history of like the Black Panther that we know from the live action stuff. Like, this did a better job tying into live action than half of the other Marvel television and Marvel shows have. You know, like, this is the kind of stuff we want. We want it to be its own individual story, stand alone by itself, but also connect to the other episodes, but also the grander thing at whole here, you know? So I'm very interested in this. I think they did a great job. Anybody that was involved with the animation or the writing or, you know, whatever, Ryan Coogler, whatever you were doing in the executive producing of this, I really, really love the world of Wakanda, and between the two Black Panther movies and this show, I think we all would love to see more of Wakanda, and whether that's a Dora Milaje show, or an Okoye show, or maybe, you know, an Okoye show titled something Knights, you know, what was the giant blue suits that they had, something, I don't know. But you guys get my point. I think we should see some more of Wakanda in another spin-off show. And I would really love to hear your thoughts about Eyes of Wakanda down in the comment section below. Or if you want to talk more Eyes of Wakanda with me on my other social medias, links for those down in the description below. If you like Marvel animation and you like this breakdown, please go check out some of my other Marvel breakdowns. I just did Ironheart recently. Earlier this year, I did Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And last year, I did X-Men 97. So plenty of Marvel breakdowns on the channel already. Go check those out if you haven't. My name is Big Cam. Thank you guys so much for coming on by. My links for my other social media is in the description below. And if you'd like to support the channel, the best way to do that is liking this video, commenting down in the comment section below, subscribing if you haven't already, and make sure you hit that bell so you don't miss future videos and you get the notifications when they come out. Once again, my name's Big Cam. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you beautiful people in the next one. Peace!